Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Autumn and today I'm going to be recommending books to read this spring. The first book I'm going to recommend is Emma by Jane Austen. This book, I mean, if the cover does not scream spring to you, I don't know what will. We are following Emma, who decides to make herself a matchmaker in her village. So she begins to meddle in the villagers' lives and starts to matchmake people, but in a very annoying way. Like, all the villagers are super annoyed with her and no one appreciates this self-anointed job that she's given herself. So it's really funny to read, especially because Emma herself has like no experience at all with love and relationships. So yeah, it's very interesting to read, super funny, and I would absolutely recommend this book for the spring. The other classic I'm going to recommend is none other than Anne of Green Gables by Lucy Maud Montgomery. This book is a classic. I mean, we are following Anne, who's 11 years old. She is this vivacious, redheaded girl who's like this most vibrant personality you can imagine. She is so positive despite kind of the trauma that's happened to her as a young girl. And when she gets adopted by the Cuthberts in Prince Edward Island, which is a province in Canada, she becomes even more positive. She's over the moon, and we are following her as she navigates having a real home for the first time and a real family. And it's just so sweet. Anne has the biggest, widest imagination possible. Ideas are constantly flowing in her brain and she just can't help but share them with everyone. And it's just so sweet. This entire series just follows Anne, and it's a coming of age for her. We get to follow her all the way until adulthood, and it's just so special. You feel so attached to Anne and you just want the best for her. She would not hurt a fly. She is just the sweetest little thing. And so yeah, I would totally recommend reading this if you haven't already. And if you have kids, this is going to be one of their favorite books, I'm certain of it. The next book I'm recommending is Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. I'm not sure why I'm recommending this in the spring, to be honest with you. It just kind of felt like a good time to read this book, so take that with what you will. We are following Elizabeth, who all she wants is to have a career in science. She wants to be a chemist, and that is literally it. She does not want to be a homemaker or a mother. She gets herself into this romantic relationship with such an amazing man, and she does end up having a child, even though she didn't want one. So she's now navigating motherhood whilst also trying to further her career in science. And this book just does such a good job of showing the difficulties and trials that women had in the 1980s trying to have a career while also, you know, doing all the homemaking things and the providing for their children and just kind of delivering on those expectations as a mother. So Elizabeth is a very likable character. She's very fierce and she fights for what she wants. And we are following her as she is the TV host in a cooking show called Lessons in Chemistry. And it's just such a good book. I think that if you like reading about women's fiction, this is a book that you have to pick up. And there's also a TV show that they made, done very well, that I would absolutely recommend. A young adult fantasy I'm going to recommend is Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. Stephanie Garber is one of my favorite authors. I loved her first series, Caraval, and I also loved this one. And in this series, we are following Jax, who is a side character in Caraval. So he's now our main character here, and he makes a deal with Evangeline because Evangeline thinks she's so smart as a human girl, and she thinks that she's going to be able to get what she wants, making a deal with an immortal who has been making deals for a long time. So Evangeline kind of gets herself in a little bit more trouble than she thought, But Jax is weirdly drawn to her, and he is trying to almost protect her, even though he doesn't normally do that. So it's a very unlikely romance that we're following. Evangeline is just this fresh, new girl that, you know, thinks that she can solve the things and do all the things without having any consequences, and it's very fun seeing her interact with Jax, who has been around forever, tricking mortals into doing certain things. So I really like this series. It's so whimsical, it is so fun, and Stephanie Garber is just such an amazing author. Her imagery is just so vivid. I feel like I can easily picture everything that she writes, and I can see the world the way that she wants it to be seen. So I would absolutely recommend this fantasy in the spring. The next book I'm recommending is Archer's Voice by Mia Sheridan. This is my favorite romance book of all time. Like, full stop. If you ever want to read a romance and if you've never read one, this is the book I would point you to. We are following Bree, who kind of moves back to a small town, and in this small town, there's a lot of gossip. And she stumbles upon this guy named Archer accidentally. So she tries to ask around because he's very ominous and mysterious, and he doesn't really tell her much. She also can speak sign language, which is what Archer communicates by for certain reasons. And we are following Bree trying to figure out why Archer is secluded and why the townspeople don't know much about him and are quite prejudiced towards him. And Bree is just the sweetest human ever, because even though the townspeople are very judgmental about Archer, she does not take that at face value. She takes her opinions and advice, but she decides that, you know what, I'm gonna get to know him for myself. And we follow them getting to know each other, and it is just the sweetest, deepest romance I've ever read. This is a slow burn romance, but for a good reason. And there's also a mystery aspect in this book, which was super interesting. And I wanted to know about the mystery as much as I wanted to read about the romance, and they're intertwined. So that was super nice to read about, because a lot of the time romances are so light and fluffy that you don't really believe in the romance, and you don't really believe in their actual, like, that they have problems. They kind of feel fake almost. But in this book, everything feels so real, and there's so much depth to both of these characters that you just can't help but love them and want them to get together. So yeah, a really, really good romance. A recent read of mine is Hello Beautiful by Anne Napolitano. This is kind of like a Little Women retelling, following 4 sisters and how their lives change with the introduction of William Waters into their life. So we follow these 4 sisters, Julia, Sylvie, and then the twin sisters, Cecilia and Emmeline, from their teenagehood all the way to their late adulthood. And William enters their life while they're teenagers, and we see how one person can quickly and devastatingly kind of affect the lives of these sisters and the relationships that they have forever. So I really don't want to say more about this. I think that just knowing it's about the family dynamics with the introduction of a guy named William is all you need to know. There's multiple point of views. All of them are so understandable, and you can't even be frustrated. Like, you can be frustrated, but it's hard to be annoyed with any of these characters because you feel like their problems are so real and raw that they're just doing the best that they can to navigate what to do in all these situations. And because they all have such different personalities, they all handle things differently, and I think that just reflects so well on how humans are, because the same thing can happen to 10 different people and each one will react differently, which is highlighted really well in this book, and I absolutely loved it. Another YA fantasy I'm going to recommend is the Cruel Prince series by Holly Black. I just read this series finally, so I'm a little bit late to this train, but this is such a good series and I'm so glad I read it. I think if anyone hasn't read it, you have to read it in the spring because literally the artwork is like so spring related. Like there's flowers and bees and mushrooms, and the world just feels like a world you would imagine when you're a kid, with the fairies and the goblins and all the mythical creatures. So that's kind of why I'm recommending it for the spring. We are following Jude, who is a mortal girl in the fairyland, and fairies are not a big fan of mortals. They kind of use mortals and abuse them because they can control them. So Jude is navigating that. Even though she's a little bit protected, she still has a lot that she has to overcome and conquer living in a world that's not her own. And she actually wants to stay in this world and rise up to power in the High King's palace. She wants a role as a knight there. So she is trying to do everything in her power that she can to get that title. And she is your classic teenage girl who's got all the angst and will rebel to get what she wants, which I absolutely loved reading about. All of the characters are so interesting, and I really like this book. Cardan is honestly her immortal enemy, I should say. And I think that their romance that's going to somehow bloom is going to be hilarious because they are legit enemies, and I don't see how they're going to like each other anytime soon. So yeah, this is a really fun fantasy series to start in the spring. The next book I'm going to recommend is one of my all-time favorite books. It's Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. If you have not read this book, now's your chance to read it. This book is so good. We're following Daisy, who is a very, very good singer that ends up joining this 60s rock band called The Six. So they form a rock band called Daisy Jones and the Six, and they become wildly famous, very, very popular in the 60s. And in one of their concerts, things kind of go awry. And after that concert, they never perform together again. And no one knows why. They never tell anyone. They don't tell any of the interviewers or reporters, or they don't even talk about it with each other. They all kind of lose contact. And decades later, we have an interviewer go and interview all of these band members individually to try and figure out what the heck happened, that their band just literally blew up in their face overnight. So this style was very, very good because it is from the interviewer's perspective. So as this interviewer asks questions and receives answers from these musicians, that's kind of how we're reading it. And I loved it. I feel like I really got to know all of these musicians individually, and we also get to see them in the past as a band together. And Daisy and Billy in particular are the most volatile band members there. They're both the singers, and they just clash a lot because they are so similar, but on that same note, they make each other so much better while also making each other so much worse. And they're both extremely talented, and we get to see how their interaction causes so much turmoil and drama for the entire musical group. So yeah, I really loved this book. It is near and dear to my heart, and I think the reveal at the end will definitely get you if you have not read this book. And there is also a TV show adaptation on this book, which I was a little bit nervous about because it's one of my favorite books ever, and the book is always better than the movie, right? But the TV show adaptation for this book is, to date, like the best adaptation I have ever seen in my life. It is like so consistent with the book. I feel they're one and the same almost. So I would absolutely recommend the TV show as well for this book. A cozy fantasy I'm going to recommend for the spring is The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst. This is a book following Kiela, who is a librarian in this capital city, and she has a sidekick that is a talking spider plant named Kaz, and they have to escape from this capital because of war. So she escapes with Kaz and a couple spell books to this remote island that her parents came from, and while she's there, she sees how much the island is struggling because of all the magic imbalances that are happening, that the island is now getting affected because of it, because no one is coming to fix the imbalance. So storms are really bad, it's very hard to grow crops, things like that. Things are just kind of falling apart. And so Kiela takes it upon herself to open a spell shop and / jam shop to help the locals. And it's not something that she initially wanted to do, but she needs to make money. And as a librarian, you can guess that she's very introverted. So it's kind of funny watching her have to interact with people, because she's like, I'd rather just be alone in my room by myself, but I literally cannot do that because I need money. So it's very funny in that sort of sense, but also this book felt a little redundant. I would just say that there is a lot of repetition about jam making and jam in general. I don't know why, but yeah, this book is good. It's very cozy and I would recommend. The only historical fiction that I'm going to recommend for the spring is Kristen Hanna's Nightingale, The Nightingale. This book follows two sisters during World War II in Paris, France, and how they try to survive the war, and how they're brought together but also torn apart at different times, and their individual journeys through the war. And we also get like a present timeline of one of the sisters reflecting on this time. So we get both point of views, and we get a present timeline as well as the past. And this book was just so good. It was so intimate. I feel like the sisters' relationship was just beautiful and tender, and you could tell that these sisters really truly cared for each other as much as themselves. And I think that every time you read a historical fiction book, you just feel pulled to care for these people, because even though it is a historical fiction book, there's so much truth behind everything that happened during that war. And this book is definitely a tearjerker. So if it's a rainy day in spring, this is a book that's gonna get you. The last book I'm going to recommend is none other than A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. Honestly, if you have not read this book and you like fantasy and or romantasy, I don't know what to tell you, because I feel like this is the book you should have started with. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. We are following Feyre, who is a human girl who accidentally kills a wolf that is also a fae. But she didn't know that at the time. So to be punished, she gets taken away from her family to live in the Spring Court, obviously. And she is kind of like imprisoned in this really nice home in the Spring Court, where it's always lovely, flowers are always blooming and that kind of thing. And she is trying to escape, obviously, and get back to her family. So we are following that. There's a little bit of a romance that builds in this book, and there are some trials in this book, but ultimately this is like your epitome of a spring fantasy book. And if you want to get into fantasy, I think this is a good place to start. Also, books 6 and 7 are coming out at the end of this year and beginning of next year, so it's a good time to start this series if you haven't already, or a good time to reread it so you're kind of up to date for the last 2 books, hopefully. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I think that this is probably the #1 book I would recommend for the spring. So yeah, those are all the books I'm going to recommend for the spring. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one soon. Bye!